Hello there, and welcome to this mini lecture. I'm going to introduce you to the topic of global Englishes. That means I'm going to talk about different dialects of English that we find around the world. Now, we don't have very much time, so there are only a few questions I'm going to touch on. But these are: who speaks English and who owns English? And I'm going to treat that as one question. And then the second question is, how are dialects of English or Englishes different from each other? And how do linguists describe these differences? Now, these are pretty big questions, so all I can really do in the next 20 minutes is to give you a brief introduction as to how linguists might approach them. Now, to help me do that, I'm going to introduce you to a lady who is very close to my heart, and her name is Amy Walker. So this is Amy.
Hello, my name is Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in London, England. You're right, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in London, weren't I? Yes, hello, my name is Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in London, England. That's right, my name is Amy Walker and I was born in Dublin, Ireland. Hi, how are you? I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25. I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Of course, I'm Scottish. I'm a walker, aren't I? You know, walker like the shortbread. Comes in the wee tin with a tartan on it. Buongiorno. My name is Amy Walker and I'm from Italy. Guten Tag. My name is Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in Berlin, in Germany. Hello. My name is Amy Walker. I was born in Prague, which is called Praha, in Czech Republic. Hello, my name is Amy Walker and I'm from Moscow, in Russia. Bonjour, je m'appelle Amy Walker. J'ai 25 ans and I was born in Paris, in France. Hi, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 and I was born in Sydney, Australia. Yes, hello, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 27, 25. And I was born in Wellington, New Zealand. Hello, mate, I'm Amy Walker and I'm true blue Aussie, mate. That's right. I'll always call Australia home. Well, hi there, how are you doing? I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in Texas. Hello, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 and I was born in California, LA. Hello, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 and I was born in Seattle, Washington. Oh, hello, I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in Toronto, Canada. What? Of course I'm doing the thing. Sorry. I'm Amy Walker. I'm 25 and I was born in Brooklyn. Hi there. My name is Amy Walker. I'm 25 years old and I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. Oh, hello. My name is Amy Walker and I'm an actress and a writer and a singer and a dancer. And I was asked here today to give you an example of the transatlantic accent I was trained in 1945. So this concludes our little program for you this evening. We do hope you've enjoyed yourself as much as I have. Thank you and good night.
So I think this is pretty impressive. It's difficult enough to do or imitate one accent in English, let alone 21 accents in a row. Now, if you're curious as to where Amy is actually from, you can ask me, or I think text me at the end of the lecture. But do that, otherwise I will forget. In the meantime, what does Amy's demonstration show us? Well, it shows us that English is spoken across the world by people from lots of different places in lots of different ways. Now, how many native speakers of English are there in the world? Well, in fact, our best estimates are there are between 375 and 400 million native speakers of English. And if we do a league table of native speakers, we can see this number is actually well behind Chinese Mandarin, where there are well over 1 billion speakers. But apart from migrant communities, Mandarin is only really spoken in China and in Taiwan. English, by contrast, is spoken as a native language by the majority of the population of the UK, the USA, Canada, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, along with other countries such as South Africa and Belize, where it's the native language of a minority of the population. English is also spoken as an official language in over 50 other countries, most of which are former colonies of the UK. So that makes English the most widely spoken language in the world. But Amy's demonstration isn't confined to places where English is a native or a second language. She also does accents from people who speak English as a foreign language as well. So she does a Russian accent, a French accent, and a German accent. Now, it's impossible to say how many people speak English as a foreign language, but we estimate in the billions. So the China People's Daily, which is obviously a newspaper, estimates that at least 300 million people in China have received some sort of English-speaking education. 300 million people is just less than the entire population of the United States and about 60 times the population of New Zealand. And that's just one country. It doesn't include numbers for continents such as Europe or South America or the rest of Asia. So this fact is impressive, but why is it important? Well, in terms of numbers, it means there are far more non-native speakers of English than there are native speakers. And this means there are far more conversations happening between non-native speakers of English than between native speakers of English. And this is a hugely important fact as it affects the concept of who owns the English language. Now, if we think back in the past, English was associated very much with the United Kingdom, and from the second half of the 20th century, also with the United States. But if we think forward in time, this might not always be the case. So if the majority of people using this language are not from these countries, can we say that English still belongs to these countries? Do these countries still have the right to say what counts as correct English? Now, these questions are all about the nature of authority and who has authority over the English language. They're also questions that we encourage our students to explore in the School of English. Now, in the meantime, we know that English is very widely spoken, but how precisely do different dialects of English vary? Well, from a linguistic perspective, that question is easily answered. Languages and dialects vary in three main ways. There's accent, vocabulary, and grammar. And if we include writing in this, we could also add spelling to that. So let's start with accent. Now, as we know, accent refers to how you pronounce words. It's also how varieties of English are most obviously different from each other. The first important point to make is that everyone has an accent. It's impossible to speak English without an accent. And we can use Amy's demonstration as an example. So one of her personae says, I'm Amy Walker and I'm 25. Now, if you were in class, I would ask you whether or not you could remember where that person was from. But as we're not, I'll remind you she's from New Zealand, which is very significant. All the other personae say they're 25, apart from the New Zealand character who's a bit confused, it seems. Why is this? Why is she confused? Well, for lots of English speakers, the New Zealand accent sounds a bit like the Australian accent, just as the Canadian accent sounds rather like the American accent. But there are some clear differences. So, for example, in New Zealand English, the I sound in the middle of a word often ends up sounding like a U sound. And the E sound often ends up sounding like an I sound. So I'll give you a couple of examples. With a New Zealand accent, fish and chips can sound a bit like fish and chops. And the sentence, yes, men like to bet, sounds a little bit like, yes, men like to bit. Now, Amy is aware of these subtle differences, and to draw attention to them, she deliberately describes herself as being 26, then 27, rather than 25. So she does this on purpose to draw attention to the noticeable features of the New Zealand accent. Now, when linguists want to generalize about the way accents are different from each other, we use the concept of a lexical set, which was developed by a British linguist called John C. Wells. Now, a lexical set is a set or a class of words that contain a similar sound, though that sound can vary from dialect to dialect. Now, Wells came up with a list of 24 lexical sets for English, where the pronunciation can differ between dialects, or Englishes, I would say. I won't go through all of them now, but here are some of them on screen. So you can see we've got the kit lexical set, and that sound in kit, which is indicated in red, you find in kid, ship, limp, and myth. There's the dress lexical set, which you find in step, ebb, tent, bread, and friend. There's the fleece lexical set with creep, need, cheese, brief, all having the same sound. There's the choice lexical set, which you can see in boy, noise, spoil, and employ. There's the goose lexical set, which you find in loop, mood, tomb, and to. And there's the trap lexical set, which you find in trap, rag, hand, and lapse. Now, the first thing you'll notice here is that the sound in the lexical set can be spelled differently because, as we know, English has confusing spelling. So the vowel sound in creep is the same as brief, even though one contains a double E and the other contains an IE. And you can find out why that is if you join our courses on Global English or the history of English. Anyway, when we say the number 26, what lexical set would we be using? Well, it's the kit lexical set. So in New Zealand English, the kit lexical set is consistently what we call centralized in the mouth. So it sounds a bit like cut. And when we say the number 27, what lexical set are we using that? Well, it's the dress lexical set, where the vowel sound in New Zealand English is a bit more like dris, dris. Now, John C. Wells took these lexical sets and he used them to compare two of the most well-known English accents, which are received pronunciation from the UK and general American. Those are the technical terms that we use to refer to them. And that's what we're going to do now, is to compare them. So, as you can see from the green boxes on screen, some of the vowel sounds here are pronounced identically in received pronunciation and general American, but many are pronounced differently. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to read the words with my accents, which is RP, and then I'm going to read them again with a general American accent, which may not be perfect, but I'll have a go. Okay, so there's kit, that's the same in general American, kit. There's dress and dress. There's trap and trap, so that's the same. There's lot in RP and lot in German American. Strut and strut are the same. Foot and foot are the same. Bath and bath are different. Cloth and cloth are different. Nurse and nurse are different. Fleece and fleece are apparently different, though to me I think they probably sound the same in both, but have to consult an American. Face and face are the same. Palm and pam, something like that, depending where you're from in the US, are different. Thought and thought are different. Goat and goat are different. Goose and goose, maybe that's the other way around. Goose and goose, I can't do that. Anyway, they're apparently different, though they sound the same to me. Price and price are the same. Choice and choice are the same. Mouth and mouth are the same. Near and near. Square and square. Start and start. North and north. Force and force. And cure and cure. Okay, can you hear the differences? That wasn't done very well, but I'm sure you can, more or less. So lexical sets are useful because they're a clear way of showing how vowel sounds are pronounced differently by different English dialect speakers. They're also useful in another way because they can help us to capture how accents of English change. So in the past, for example, there was a clear difference or split in the pronunciation of the words you can see on screen. Now, these words are which and which. I'm just wondering if you can hear the difference between those two sounds, which and which. Now, if you put your hand to your mouth, you will feel a little puff of air with the Hermione Granger version of the word, so which. But with the question version of this word, when pronounced that way, you should feel a much bigger puff of air, so which, which, which. Nowadays, virtually all dialects of English or Englishes pronounce these words identically. So which is which? Well, they're identical. We can therefore say that there is a which merger. But there is still one country where there is a difference in pronunciation. And that country is, yes, Scotland. So in Scottish English, we can say there is a which split. That means for this particular word, we can also say that Scottish English has the oldest sort of form of pronunciation. Okay, so that's a quick look at accents and how linguists capture the similarities and differences between accents. Now, the next way in which varieties of English are different from each other is in terms of vocabulary. Again, there are lots of differences, not just between countries, but also within countries. Most of the time, this doesn't really cause confusion, but on occasion it might. So I remember one time I was at a dinner party and there was some British and American people there, and there was also an Australian. And the Australian guy was talking and he said he was looking forward to getting back to Australia so he had the chance to wear thongs in the sunshine again. Now, for most Australians, thongs are this, okay? For most people from the UK and the US, however, a thong is this. So when this guy said that he wanted to wear thongs in the sunshine, he was thinking this. But for all the British and American people at the dinner party, we were all thinking this. Okay, true story. Now, most people in America and Britain tend to call the things you wear on your feet flip-flops. But in New Zealand, they're called jandals, which is short for Japanese sandals. And in Hawaii, they're called, in India, they're called Hawaii chapels. And in the Philippines and some other places, they're called slippers. So lots of big vocabulary differences there. Now, vocabulary and accent are often the most striking difference in the way people talk, but grammar and syntax are another important difference. So let's take this sentence as an example. You want some rice? You want some rice? Now, this sentence is in fact identical in standard British, Australian, and American English. But in Singaporean English, we get this instead. You want rice, ah? You want rice, ah? Now, why are there these differences? Well, as we know, English was taken from the British Isles to America, Australia, and New Zealand. And a lot of the time, the same English way of saying things was passed down from generation to generation. So in essence, the way people speak in these old, what we call settler colonies, is actually very similar. But in places where English was used alongside local languages, you often hear the influence of a person's first language on their second language. And we can see this influence in this example. So in standard British or American English, the tone of your voice often goes up in questions, right? So you say, you want some rice? However, as most of you, I think, will know, because most of the people I'm speaking to are probably are from Hong Kong, in Chinese, tone isn't used across sentences in this way. Or to give it the technical term, tone is not used at the suprasegmental or prosodic level in Chinese. Instead, tone is used to distinguish individual words. Now, given most of you process tone differently to monolingual English speakers, it's actually quite difficult for Chinese speakers to ask questions in English using tone in the same way as a Brit or an American. It is, of course, possible, but it doesn't come across quite so naturally. However, Chinese Singaporeans or Hong Kong people or mainlanders still need the ability to ask questions in English, just like everyone else. So one way of doing that is simply to use the same attitudinal particles that you find in Chinese. Now, as you will know, in a number of dialects, a number of Chinese dialects, is the particle people use to ask a question if you're with friends and you want to slightly soften the impact of a question. And this is why we get "you want rice in Singaporean English." Okay, so that is a very tiny peek into global Englishes and how linguists in the School of English talk about them. Now, if you came to study English with us, you would also learn about how dialects of English evolve, so where they began and how they're changing, how speakers mix English with other languages, including Cantonese, and that's called code switching or translanguaging sometimes, and what do people think about their own dialect of English and other dialects of English from around the world. So that's to do with attitudes to English. So do consider joining us to study not just English, but also Englishers. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to open the floor now to questions. Any questions if you want to type them up? Do you want to know where Amy is actually from? If someone wants to type yes in the little box, then I'll know that people are interested in that. Okay, right. Suddenly lots of questions. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Would it be possible for social science sub-degree students to enter the senior year of linguistics at the Faculty of Arts? You know, I am not the person to ask that question. I think that question needs to be directed towards Liz.
I'm actually here.
Oh, hello, hello.
Hi. But I think that person needs to direct the question to everyone so I can see it.
Oh, okay.
But you can carry on with your, I'm the general American accent, by the way, if, if you need. Yeah. But please go ahead with your Amy answers.
Okay, so Amy is actually from Washington State, so the northwest of the US. Yeah, she's not from the UK. Some people think she's British. Her British, well, her Southern English accents are pretty good, but I have met a Scottish person that's a bit skeptical about her Scottish accent. But yeah, she's from the US, Northwest. Any other questions about anything? Are there courses that study the relation of English phonetics to other languages like French and German? That's not actually something that we do much of in the School of English. One of our colleagues, or mine and Liz's colleague, Ricky, would be able possibly to do something like that. But that kind of work is generally done in the linguistics department, which is the department above us. We focus on English because we're the School of English. And I've got one question. How can I improve my English like a native speaker? Well, I suppose one of the things that I'm trying to prove through this demonstration is that you shouldn't, well, in my view, philosophically, you shouldn't really feel as though you have to sound like a native speaker. And the reason why I say that is because, as I've said in the lecture, most of the conversations happening in English happen between non-native speakers of English. So that would be, say, someone who's from Russia speaking to someone who's from Thailand. Now, in that case, there's not actually a great deal of value in the Russian person trying to sound really American or British or Australian or anything like that, because they're not dealing with Brits or Americans or other native speakers there. They're dealing with someone from Thailand. So the question becomes, why would you want to sound like a native speaker? Now, philosophical questions aside, if you did want to sound like a native speaker, then there are, I suppose the easier thing to do would be to get recordings of native speakers and practice the pronunciation. I should add, though, that that is not something that we do in the School of English. We encourage diversity in dialects. We don't say you must sound American or you must sound British. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next one. Would it be possible, so I'll go to one after that. Does the School of English explore the second language acquisition of English? That is one of the courses that we have traditionally offered, and I think that is something that we will continue to offer in the future. We do language acquisition courses, yes. What is the class size? This varies a lot. Generally speaking, some of the smaller classes will be around, well, depending on the subject or the specific class you're attending, it can be quite small. It can be, say, 12 students. For the smaller classes, the maximum number of students we have, I think, is 25. But then in some classes, the number of students there are much bigger, and it can actually go up to 50. So it varies a lot, between 10 to 50, depending on how subscribed the course is. Okay. Okay, that's from Liz. Oh, someone's answered that. Okay. Is the School of English hard to enter? I'm not sure if Liz has answered that one.
I did.
Okay.
You need a level 5 in DSE English if you're a JUPAS student in order to become an English studies major. If you have other qualifications such as IB, A-levels, SATs, or qualifications from the mainland, you need to contact the School of English office so that they will be able to figure out the equivalency to the DSE.
Okay. I have one question, which is, do you think that, thanks for that, Liz. One question is, do you think RP is actually worthless? You know, most people, even the British, don't really speak naturally or speak RP naturally. There's the Cockney accent, the Celtic accent. You're absolutely right that a minority of British people speak with a received pronunciation accent. About 3% actually is the estimate. Do I think it's worthless? Well, we don't really use terms like worthless or not, because that sort of embeds lots of value judgments. We simply say that there are lots of different ways that you can speak English, and instead of thinking that you must speak RP or you must speak General American, you don't have to do that. However, it's your choice if you wanted to go for another British accent, because you've mentioned some, to learn Cockney. But the problem with that then is that most of the pedagogical and teaching materials that you'll come across won't actually use Cockney. So they'll tend to use received pronunciation. And in American teaching materials, they will tend to use General American rather than, say, a Southern accent or African American vernacular English accents. Those you won't really find those in teaching materials. But if you were really determined to speak English with one of those, they could be regional accents, or they could be ethnic accents, those sorts of things, then access to popular media, right? That's how you do it, through listening to films and that sort of thing. Can I take a linguistics in B?
BAB-Ed. That's
BAB, yeah, BAB-Ed. So I was close to Babel. Sorry, Liz, that's probably for you. Have you answered that?
No, I haven't. I will do that now.
Thanks.
There's a question about what do linguists actually do that I think you probably would be useful for you to answer. What
do linguists actually do? So I've tried to indicate that a little bit. We probably, well, I'd say we study things like accent, we study things like acquisition of English, we study things like how language evolves, we study the grammar of languages. Yeah, we study how language is processed in the brain, sort of psycholinguistics. There are lots of different routes into linguistics. It sort of depends on the kind of linguistics you're interested in. And the linguistics that I do is what is called sociolinguistics, which means that I'm interested in the relationship between society and language. So what people think and feel about different kinds of accents, and how accents and dialects vary from place to place, and that sort of thing. And also how and why people mix languages. Those are the kind of questions that I'm interested in. But linguists, as a bigger kind of group of people, we study lots and lots of different, and research lots and lots of different things. The School of English does more sociolinguistics than it does other types of linguistics, whereas the linguistics department above us, they will cover a bigger range of linguistics. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, creative writing. There's a question about creative writing. I think that's been answered. I don't think I can see any more questions about the lecture or anything like that. Oh, how would you describe the diglossic situation in Hong Kong? Briefly. Well, the diglossic situation in Hong Kong has traditionally been characterized as English being the high language and Cantonese being the low language, and as there being not a high degree of bilingualism. Yep, so a low degree of bilingualism, relatively speaking, and that's an English on the top and Cantonese below that. That's the traditional characterization of diglossia in Hong Kong. In fact, though, more recently, that traditional definition of diglossia in Hong Kong has changed. So we're moving towards increasing levels of bilingualism as more and more young children learn English in kindergarten and primary and secondary school. So there's increasing bilingualism. That's something that's been noted in the literature. And also, even though people, I think, would probably still say that English is the high language in Hong Kong, obviously political changes mean that that is changing as well, because Chinese is, and when I say that, I mean Mandarin Chinese, is becoming increasingly important in Hong Kong. So we're not just having diglossia, but triglossia. So that actually is a question that you might get asked on the course that I teach, right? So you could get asked that in Global English, or that could come up as an essay question. Can you characterize the speech situation in Hong Kong in terms of diglossia and other things? But yeah, that's one question answer there. Okay, thanks, Horace. Any other questions?
Danny, could you put your email into the chat? Because I think we actually should let you go for now.
There you go.
But please, those of you who have joined us today, thank you. We hope to see you soon, hopefully face to face. If you have any questions, you can email me at, I've just put my email in the chat, lizho@hku.hk. I'm the coordinator for undergraduate studies in the School of English. So if you have any questions about the curriculum or the English major, you can email me directly. If you have any questions about linguistics, you can email Dr. Weston. He's put his email in the chat. And if you have any questions about JUPAS or any other inquiries that are more administrative, the School of English email is also in the chat. So thank you everyone for coming today. And thank you, Danny, for giving a wonderful lecture.
Thanks very much, Liz. And thank you everyone for coming. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.